It's time for some real content. This video is about stigma and myths about sociopathy you've heard, not just in media, but from popular psychologists today. How does the world talk about them? Us. So it's about stigmatizing those carrying these disorders and the results of that mistake. And you'll see that it is in fact a mistake, especially if it results in, that's not me, when it just might be, even a little. We're gonna keep this one a little lighter today. Hi, my name is Jessica Lee, and I have all the things. It started off with borderline personality disorder, but it evolved to narcissistic personality disorder under stress, and finally settled to full-blown ASPD. I am a card-carrying sufferer of sociopathy, which made sense. I was worried I was autistic, but I'm not. My whole thing, the purpose of this channel that you'll hear over and over again, is that we have to feel safe enough to talk about the bad stuff, the urges, the thoughts, the feelings and emotions that suddenly sweep you up. And if we stigmatize that stuff, as we see in media, which is, let's face it, where we get most of our information, it makes us hide from it more. It makes anyone hide from it, repress it. That's bad, man. That ain't me. And maybe it is. And repression is what makes it bubble over. It makes it worse, so much worse. It lets you feel the shame for the things you shouldn't. It prevents you from feeling regret, which prevents you from making any steps to getting better, to not hurting others. I'm not just speaking to the victims of people who've encountered this disorder. I speak to the 3% or more of us who may not even know we have it, who don't want to admit it because the stigma is so bad. But you're also a victim of the disorder. So here we go. Sociopaths and stigma. The first in a series of media and sociopaths or something like that. This will be a theme I'll be returning to a lot. Recap on the Great Father culture. When we ourselves haven't personally encountered an event, situation, or certain emotions, our only real access to immersing ourselves in an experience that isn't in our immediate reach is through media, stories, fiction. The portrayal of said art piece helps us to grow empathy or elicits a call to action by the audience and moves us to form a belief system that we're not even aware that we're forming. There's a quote that I love about reading. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads only lives one. That's a quote by George R.R. Martin. I will never finish The Winds of Winter. That's another quote of his. He says that to himself every day. Anyways, story tells us how to interact with each other, how to have dates, how to be charming at parties, etc. The problem comes with certain stories that need a good, compelling villain. Here we go. Stigma is a social concept that refers to negative attitudes, beliefs, or stereotypes about a person or a group based on characteristics such as their race, gender, culture, religion, socioeconomic status, or health status. It can lead to discrimination and exclusion of the individual. Collectively, as a society, when we hear the words narcissist or sociopath, we have a very specific idea that springs to mind. A stigmatized belief system of what these groups of people look like and behave. And they exist. There are real monsters out there. But it's also a spectrum, and they could be your partner, your parents, your boss, your brain surgeon even. And the monsters happen because they had to hide their thoughts, their great shame early on, which is a video in and of itself. Our perception of these personality traits were formed through media's portrayal of these characters. History time. Starting in the 1960s, you get good old-fashioned psycho. Psychoanalysis was becoming more popular for writers as it proved helpful for them for having a roadmap for believable human behavior. Nowadays, we have the Enneagram. In the 1960s, mental illness in general, which included personality disorders, was often sensationalized or stigmatized. Characters with the disorders were portrayed as insane or villainous. It had very little reflection and limited understanding of these characterizations. Psychological thrillers started to have a rise around the 1960s to the 1980s. So it was films like One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or Taxi Driver, characters hinting at antisocial personality traits or borderline behaviors. However, these portrayals often lacked nuance and were dramatized for entertainment's sake.
You talking to me? Well, who the hell else are you talking to? Talking to me? Oh, yeah? Huh? Okay.
There was a psychological awareness boom that arose around the 1990s, and that was due to increased public interest in psychology, which led to more in-depth exploration of personality disorders. Movies like Girl Interrupted, which featured characters with borderline personality disorder, which sparked conversation about its reality.
Tell me that you don't take that blade and drag it across your skin and pray for the courage to press down. Tell me how your daddy helps you cope with that. Illuminate me.
TV shows like The Sopranos explored antisocial and narcissistic traits through Tony Soprano, which brought a lot more depth and relatability to such characters. Now we enter the modern era, which is the 2000s to the present. Media has grown more empathetic and nuanced in its portrayals. I want to take a second here and distinguish between more sophisticated and nuanced portrayals versus sympathetic ones. No one wants to be these people. They shouldn't. I just mean the portrayal of them went from monsters in Jaws to being followed at home and being understood. You see that they too are suffering and in pain. No one wants to be Tony Soprano. Do you want his poor health, his wife and children who hate him? This became more apparent in The Penguin, say, because sometimes people see the main character portrayed and confuse it with being glorified. Repeat, no one wants to be these people or have the misfortune of coming across the swath they cut through people's lives. But we see that they're people. As much as it makes us uncomfortable, they're miserable too. Characters with personality disorders are increasingly seen as multifaceted individuals rather than stereotypes or villains. Recent TV shows like The Penguin and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So here's an example. In the show, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, here's assassin Jane Smith being difficult with her work partner and also romantic partner. They're having an argument. He's trying to connect. That's too much for her. So barriers come up in a form of pushing him away by being just awful. Just a real putting him down.
No,
Like, what do you mean?
I'm wrong because I actually have never seen you read a book in the entire time I've known you, so it makes sense.
I know you, Jane, and you're very calculated about how you put things. So if you want to call me stupid, just call me
I'm not
stupid and
calling
we
you
can have a
stupid.
conversation
No, I'm
about
not
it.
calling you stupid. I'm just saying you don't read books, which is true.
And the fight ends with her still wanting him.
Who is your emergency contact?
What?
Who is your emergency contact?
My mom.
You're mine.
This makes no sense. She's insane. Do you want to be with someone, which has a price, or not? These are counterintuitive motivations, or self-sabotage. Either way, for a smart person, that's pretty dumb. Pick one, dude. Now, spoilers. Here they are again on Truth Serum. She's got no barrier to vulnerability if she tried. Has to be honest.
When you call me Japanese, it makes me feel closer to my dad. I don't like my dad. You judge me for not talking to him.
I do.
I do too. But he doesn't want to know me. Oh, you know what that does to a woman? It impacts her. Oh.
God. For some of us, it takes nothing short of this. More on that later. That's a whole other video, or 5. There are really talented writers who are just nailing the characterization of said villains, which helps us to understand at the end of the story, there really isn't anyone evil. Just the wounded who wounds. Yes, their actions are evil, but there's also something to be said that a good guy needs a monster to hunt just to feel like a hero. Yes, hurt people, but healed people heal people. It's not just in fiction. You see it as a popular refrain here on YouTube. Do me a favor and Google sociopath and narcissist here. You'll find, God, just countless of pages of people talking about them as survivors from the bad guys. There's probably like a 1 to 200 ratio of somebody who's willing to come forward as one themselves and speak about the harm they've caused and how they happened. It's just not done. But it sure is a popular subject matter for those angry cliques. Here comes the rise of my frustration.
psychopathic. A psychopath is a parasitical predator. They'll use you for their own purposes, and they'll do everything they can to make what's yours theirs. Machiavellian, so Machiavellian people are manipulators. Their goal is to get what they can and use their language for that purpose. So Machiavellians are manipulators. The narcissists are people who kick down and kiss up. That's a good way of thinking about it, right? They take all the credit when something goes wrong, and they distribute all the blame when there's a problem. They want all the glory, and they want to do none of the work. And that's a narcissist. And then there's the sadistic element. So Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic, and sadistic. And sadistic people take positive delight in causing other people misery.
Can a narcissist develop more empathy? Well, here's what Dr. Ramani has to say.
I haven't seen any change. The heartbreak of narcissism is that you can actually train this person to be a little bit more empathic, to not be so jerky and not be so entitled, and actually listen to other people. As soon as there's some stress in the system, they blow again. The rubber band goes right back. And so narcissists don't tend to retain that growth.
And as someone who's been diagnosed with this disorder, having 2 professional pop psychologists casting fearful, villainous judgments on me had me hiding in shame. And I was accepting that I was a monster who couldn't get better, that I was a lost cause, and that any measures taken to healing, to changing, was hopeless.
What does that mean?
I think it's that they're doing whatever they're doing. Like, I meditate 75 times a day, and I do mindfulness this, and I ayahuasca that, and blah, 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 blah. And they do all of that, but they're still really going through the world in a rather monstrous, entitled, dismissive, contemptuous way.
They were teaching me that I shouldn't dare dream of healing. So the only message that I was getting, you're an outcast. Isolate. This kind of isolation and judgment creates shame, and shame is the kryptonite that exacerbates the symptoms, as the existing belief that oneself is a monster and is disgusting. It's now even confirmed by 2 professionals who know better than me, and anyone suffering from this disorder knows that that's the ultimate kill shot, to have an unstable sense of self, an authority figure telling you who you are. And funny enough, they're both wrong, flat wrong, no arguments. It's true no matter how much you yell. They are wrong. Jordan is a student of Jung, and Jung advocates facing one's shadow. But to run even from oneself in order to find acceptance, especially if you have this disorder, is truly the hopeless death he speaks of. They'll be drawn to fill this hole and not be able to stop eating others. If you or your loved ones are struggling with a personality disorder, below in the descriptions, I'll leave channels and clinicians of people who really helped me on my journey. Channels like Healthy Gamer Gigi, Borderline Notes, or clinicians like Dr. Gabor Mate. They made me feel less disgusted with myself and was able to really take a look at my trauma. They really helped me, so did my therapist and my loved ones. You can save your own, and maybe, just maybe others. It's a much better legacy than harming people. Healed people heal people too. So I'll see you next time.